Mr. Tettah, thank you so much for coming to the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center today to spend some time speaking with us.
It's my pleasure, and thank you very much for inviting me.
It really is a pleasure to have you here, and especially on some somewhat short notice. I know you've got a very busy trip, but I'd love to ask, how is your trip going so far?
It's gone quite well. I've had the opportunity to meet people in New York, in Washington, from both the private sector, the business sector, also from government. I've had the opportunity to talk about Ghana and what our aspirations are. And I've been received quite well, and so I'm happy.
That's terrific. What are some of the major goals for this particular trip?
Well, one of the problems that I find is the tendency for some Americans to think that Africa is a country as opposed to a continent. And so when you have some difficulties in one part of the continent, then it's assumed that it affects all the other countries of Africa. And unfortunately, over the period, what that has translated into, I think, is a reluctance to look for business opportunities in Africa because it's considered to be too high risk, largely because of the bad press we've received, because it's only the bad news that makes the headlines. And so one of the things that we want to do as a government is to reach out, especially to the American corporate world, to explain why Ghana is different, to encourage people to look at Ghana as an investment destination, and to see that in Africa there are also opportunities that can, of course, give a good return on investment. And from our point of view as Ghanaians, we'd benefit from the capital investment and the transfer of technology and skill.
Is there a Ghanaian-U.S. business council that facilitates exchange between business people in our two countries?
There's the American Chamber of Commerce in Ghana, which is made up of companies that either have U.S. shareholding or a U.S. background who have already taken the initiative to invest in Ghana. And they do some work to promote business between Ghana and the United States. We also work with the Corporate Council on Africa. They are focused on Africa as a whole. But this initiative that we're starting at the moment is to work both through the private sector and the public sector, and of course to also talk to the media, to dispel, as I said, some of the misconceptions about doing business in Africa and to focus more on Ghana.
Ghana is unique in many ways, but one of the ways that stood out to me in the past few weeks as I've been doing some research is just the location. You know, it's been called the gateway to Africa. You're in the heart of the Gold Coast. How is that location advantageous to businesses in Ghana?
Well, it's advantageous in the sense that from Ghana you can reach not only so many different African countries along the west coast, but also the European continent and also the United States. Because what we have dividing us is the Atlantic, but we do have direct flights out of Accra almost every day from United and Delta. We have direct flights out of Accra every day to the different countries in Europe. We have flights from Accra to the Far East. And because we're almost just above the equator on 0 degrees, and because the Greenwich Meridian, 0 degrees, also passes through Ghana, you can say that we're almost at the center of the world.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's a unique distinction. In terms of trade and import and export, I've seen the numbers in terms of foreign direct investment from the U.S., from China. They're staggering numbers, and it appears that Ghana has a robust international export business, for lack of a better word. What is Ghana's trade relations like with their neighbors? As
far as trade within the West African sub-region is concerned, we do have a lot of informal trade. I would prefer to have a lot more formal trade. And indeed, we deal mostly with Nigeria, with our immediate neighbors of Togo, Burkina Faso, and before the current disturbances, Côte d'Ivoire.
I do want to ask you about Côte d'Ivoire. And I was curious how the political instability in that country might be affecting Ghana right now.
Well, it hasn't affected us significantly yet. And that is because even though there's political instability, there has not been an outbreak of violence that would encourage people to cross the border and come into Ghana. And we are very much against anything that would precipitate any violence or disturbance, because we know that we would most likely be the first country to suffer the consequences of that, especially where you have displaced people moving into Ghana. But we are hopeful that through the efforts of both ECOWAS and the African Union, there would be a way of resolving that dispute through dialogue.
Well, I would certainly hope so. And I would also think it ties into cocoa production. Ghana is a large producer of cocoa. Cote d'Ivoire certainly is as well. Is there an opportunity for Ghana to pick up some of that cocoa production that may be slowing down in Cote d'Ivoire?
Well, I don't think the cocoa production in Cote d'Ivoire has slowed down as such. They are,
okay,
after all, the largest cocoa producer in the world, and we're second. But the difference is that we have a premium product. And whatever is the world market price of cocoa at any point in time, our cocoa sells for a little bit higher. And that's because our cocoa board, which is the one agency that is responsible for the marketing of cocoa and also has oversight of the quality control mechanisms, is very particular about how we go through the process of fermentation, of drying, of grading, so that we can continue to maintain that premium. It is not the same process in Cote d'Ivoire, and we don't necessarily find it interesting to have a mixing. We would like very much to be able to maintain the high grade of our cocoa and the reputation that we have on the international market.
So there is a difference between the two cocoas coming out of those two countries.
A difference, especially as far as the treatment of the final crop is concerned, and that makes the difference in quality.
If political instability continues in Cote d'Ivoire, won't that drive up the cost of cocoa?
The price of cocoa, probably.
Probably.
And of course that would be of benefit to us.
So should I buy all of my chocolate products now?
Well, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are not the only producers of cocoa, thankfully.
Okay.
So no, I wouldn't say that you should buy all your chocolate products now. But of course it will impact the cocoa price, and you've seen a significant rise over the last couple of weeks. This really is not the prime buying season, because right now we are probably getting the minor season of the crop, which was harvested late last year. The challenge will be when it comes to the major cocoa harvest season, and we still have not been able to resolve the situation in Cote d'Ivoire, because of then, of course, marketing of the product becomes a challenge. Our hope is that this issue would be resolved long before then.
Do you anticipate that the United Nations or the country of Ghana, the United States, might get involved in the situation in Cote d'Ivoire, or do you think that that's something that can be handled internally?
I think that it is better to let the African Union and ECOWAS do what they can through the heads of state that have been selected to go through a process of dialogue with President Ouattara and former President Gbagbo to help them to sort of resolve this stalemate. I think that it's better because it would have more acceptance on the African continent. The United States, in as much as we appreciate the support of the United States, and you realize when you watch right now a video of what has been going on in Libya, people appreciate that CNN has a presence in Libya and is reporting what is going on in Benghazi. But I think that by and large it's important for Africans to find ways of solving our own problems, so that at the end of the day we can develop the mechanisms for dealing with our disputes and be seen to be looking after ourselves.
Given what's happening in northern Africa, you mentioned Libya, what impact do you expect that might have on other parts of Africa, including Ghana?
I think it's important to look at the profile of those countries. In all of the countries that have recently undergone this kind of turmoil, the leadership has not changed, sometimes for about 30 years. People have not had the opportunity to choose. Young people seeing developments in other parts of the world wonder why they don't also have the opportunity in those countries to hold their leadership to account. In Ghana, we've had 5 elections over the last 18 years. We go to elections every 4 years to select our president, our parliament, and these are highly competitive elections, and elections that have been described by the international community as free, fair, and credible. We don't have the same problems. We do have a real democracy, and so I don't think at all that will be affected by the disturbances in northern Africa.
And from what I can tell, you perhaps because of the democracy that's so successful that you have in place, it also appears that you have very highly skilled and motivated workers and a quality of life and standard of living that's really increased significantly in the last 10 or 15 years. It
has. We do still, though, have our challenges with poverty. And it is our focus as a government to do what we can to make sure that we continue to reduce poverty. But indeed, the benefits of the system of governance that we have is that we've been able to build strong institutions. So this is not about personalities, but it's about creating credible institutions, creating a legal and regulatory framework that people, especially business people, can feel is predictable, is clear, is transparent, is understandable, and of course, which encourages them to invest in our country. We've made investments in education, in infrastructure development, in healthcare. I'm not saying that we've done everything we need to do. We still need to do a lot more. But we are putting in place the foundations that we believe will help our economy to grow significantly.
Now the U.S. and Ghana appear to enjoy a very close relationship. And recently, Ghana was awarded a Millennium Challenge Corporation grant. I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about the grant and some of the places that the money is being spent.
Indeed, we did benefit from the first compact, and we're one of the countries that has been selected for a second compact. So we certainly must have been doing things right.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that money has been spent, one, on infrastructural development, improving roads, improving irrigation facilities, helping to strengthen our rural banking network so that more people are able to plug into the banking system. In fact, our rural banking network has been computerized so that now they're also online, and then it can plug into the larger commercial banks. We've also been able to develop our non-traditional exports, especially as far as horticultural products are concerned. We've been able to put in place some of the infrastructure that is required to build our cold chains so that we can have an increase our export of fresh produce. Larger commercial farmers who produce horticultural products like pineapples and fresh fruits for export were also assisted to build pack houses on their farms, which all help to assure the improved quality of the produce. And by and large, we've had the kind of investments that have made a significant impact on our agribusiness development. For the second compact, we want to look at things that will be innovative, that will leverage more private sector funds, that indeed will help to be transformational and develop and deepen our economic institutions further, and more importantly, create more diversity. And so we're very excited about this, and we look forward to all that will come out of it.
I've read a bit about Lake Volta, largest man-made lake in the world, and it sounds like Ghana is so far ahead, or maybe it's more fair to say just really doing a fantastic job of taking advantage of the resources at their disposal in terms of using hydroelectric power. How has that changed Ghana? What are some of the dynamics that have resulted from this hydroelectric power boon that you all have created there?
Well, it's created a situation where we have electrification all across the country. For instance, you don't just get electricity in our capital and some of the larger cities. Every district capital is linked to the national grid, and a lot of rural communities are also linked to the national grid. Our focus is to make sure that all communities are linked to the national grid within the next 10 years, because it's important that we don't have pockets of power generation, but we have electricity everywhere. It's key to being able to help small and medium-sized businesses to grow. We've taken advantage of hydro energy through the Volta Lake, as you mentioned. We also have another hydro project which is in development in Bui. We have also encouraged independent power producers who have done combined cycle plants, mainly using natural gas. Now that we have oil, we're looking to use the gas to generate more electricity. And we indeed want to move up to 5,000 megawatts by 2015. We're ambitious.
That's terrific. And you're exporting some of this hydroelectric energy, correct?
Not at the moment, because our local demand is quite high.
Okay.
And so that's the reason why we're looking to increase our generating capacity so that we have sufficient to meet our local demand, and also we're in a position to export.